Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I am Oliver Gwynne, and this is where I give you my informal and completely unrehearsed thoughts on marketing data and strategy. This week, is it smart to act dumb? Recently, I was in Asia, in a Mandarin speaking country, and I have a decent level of understanding of Mandarin. My speaking level is terrible. It's really, really low. It's probably the same level as like a toddler or something like that. I know enough that I know the important things. So if I get lost, and I did get lost, I can ask for help, I can ask for directions, I can order food in a restaurant, I can say hello and greetings and introduce myself. But beyond that, probably you would struggle to understand me. I do find that Mandarin is a very, very difficult language to speak. The tones are very difficult to pick up on. But my level of understanding of Mandarin when people are speaking Mandarin is very, very high. I'd say maybe 80% I understand. It's very context-based language. And so with a little bit of information, I can normally follow a conversation, especially if I'm concentrating. And I will preference this by saying I do need to sort of concentrate. If I'm doing something and people are talking in the background, I probably am not following that conversation fully. But certainly, I understand what people are talking as speaking Mandarin to me most of the time. If you talk about like skiing or something that I'm not familiar with the concept with, I ain't going to follow that. I remember one time my friends were talking about going to a nightclub called Heaven, and I thought they were talking about like death and stuff. I was like, what on earth are you guys talking about? I was really looking at them like confused, and they're like, what do you think we're talking about? I'm like, are you talking about going to heaven? Like, yeah. What? Heaven is a nightclub. Oh, okay. So my understanding is quite good, but when I'm in Asia, being, obviously a foreigner, being an odd person out, and not being able to speak the language particularly well, people assume that I don't understand what they're saying. And this is quite interesting in a lot of ways because people will speak about you or in front of you quite a lot often, and you learn interesting things. And they also are more willing to share things with other people who speak Mandarin because they think that you can't quite follow their conversation, even if you can completely follow it. I was in a restaurant and there was a noodle dance at this restaurant, which sounds rude, but it's just where they like stretch out the noodle and they sort of like fling it in your face and they do this fun little dance. It's great. If you ever get the chance, definitely do that. I've had a few, so I was quite familiar with what the noodle dance was. But the guy in the restaurant was like, hey, server, when we do the noodle dance, can you make sure you, in this guy's face? And the guy said, yeah, don't worry, I got you. I was like, I understand what you're talking about, guy. You don't need to, I understand what you're talking. He was like, oh, okay, yeah. And, I'm always happy to have a noodle thrown in my face. But, you know, I just found it amusing that he was saying that right in front of me. And I was just like, yeah, I do actually know what you're talking about. And it made me think about situations in the past where I've dealt with like, CEOs or very senior, very experienced people. And sometimes they ask seemingly quite dumb questions. I'll ask really basic questions. And I thought, like, you should know the answer to this. Why am I telling you this? Has always been my instinctive. But I thought, actually, maybe they're doing something really smart because even if you know the answer to a question, by asking in a way like, oh, can you explain this to me? You kind of throw somebody off guard and you get to hear their thoughts, their thought process about something that maybe they wouldn't normally share with you because you're an experienced person and you know something really well. Normally, you might just say, oh, I think X is the answer. And they're more likely to agree with you if you're their junior because you know. But if you go, oh, what's this? What would you do in this situation? I don't know what to do. What do you think you'd recommend? Then it gives them a chance to actually to hear your thoughts and sort of correct them if they're the wrong way around. And it's a much nicer and more interesting way, I think, of handling that situation where maybe somebody is doing something because they've got a preconception or they've got slightly the wrong opinion. And you can sort of say, oh, well, actually, in my opinion, this is the reason why. But that conversation doesn't happen unless you sort of feign ignorance. Now, I'm a data person today, but I did growth marketing for 10 years. I love growing things. And my route to data is I want to grow things through data. So I always am the most humble person in our organization. Even if you are like a junior analyst from day one and you've just come from university, I always like to say, you should know more than me. if I'm giving you answers to things, something has gone very wrong. And I always like to be very, very humble. And my boss is very kind to me. And she's always like, you know a lot, Oliver, and don't worry about this, because I think she thinks that I'm being serious. But I'm always put myself in a position where I'm like, oh, what do you guys think? And what's this? Because I want to learn and I want to enhance my own knowledge. And I think that that's been a really great way of doing it. And also to our clients who are less technical people, it just shows you like, hey, if I can learn this thing, you can learn this thing. So I think I've actually benefited from this standing point where I'm more humble and I downplay my own level of knowledge so that I can hear people's thoughts and opinions, and I can then learn from them and benefit them and influence them a little bit. I was also curious if there had been any studies done about people who purposely sort of downplay their own knowledge and what the effects on that. I found quite a few actually. The main ones, unfortunately, were a bit negative. So ResearchGate did a study called The Logic of Strategic Ignorance. And it found that in regulated industries, companies may purposely avoid acquiring certain types of knowledge to reduce compliance burdens or evade scrutiny. And after a crisis, institutions may highlight their ignorance to avoid accountability, for instance, claiming that they didn't foresee risks despite having access to predictive data. Strategic ignorance can also serve as a shield, helping actors justify actions or inactions in complex, uncertain environments. Now, the world is a complicated place, a multifaceted place, but I'm sure that we've all been in that situation where we didn't have a complete picture. We weren't certain on our actions. We've had to go out on a limb and we've gone, well, I didn't know that this was going to happen. I couldn't anticipate the response of that. And some things seem really obvious in retrospect, but they're not always obvious at the time. And I always believe that people don't do things intentionally bad, or they don't try and avoid scrutiny or best practice, or they purposely go around legal requirements and just feign ignorance. I don't believe really in real life that happens a lot. I think most of the people I've met, when you say, oh, especially with something like privacy or GDPR, they don't pretend that they don't know any better, or that they're willing to do that because they know the long-term negative effects are there. It can, ruin your reputation with that person for a long time. So I don't believe that that's necessarily true, but I can completely believe that in research they found that people were purposely avoiding highlighting something where they maybe knew there was a problem, or if there'd just recently been a crisis, then I can completely understand the natural inclination to go, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't know any better, and we're going to look into this and review this for the future, even if that might not be the case. There was another study done by a company called SSRM called Feigning Ignorance as a Strategic Tool. This study explored how individuals in competitive or cooperative settings might benefit from acting as though they lack knowledge. So a little bit more in line with what I'm talking about today. So for competitive advantage in negotiations, appearing less informed can lead to an opponent underestimating one's bargaining power, offering better terms, or revealing more information. So there's game theory implications there, where pretending ignorance can shift expectations in iterative games such as poker or business negotiations, forcing opponents to adapt their strategies. I think this is that thing where if you're playing snooker or pool or something and you pretend that you're really bad, somebody might go more easy on you, or they're more likely to bet early because they think that you don't know any better, so they overplay their hand, and then you can take advantage of that situation. So it's kind of interesting, and I think that's very true. If you are acting like you don't know any better, maybe somebody will try and get an advantage, but into doing so, they kind of reveal more about their intentions to you. A key insight from this was that strategic ignorance disrupts the flow of information, crediting asymmetrics that can be exploited over time. So they found that in high-stakes negotiations, if you act as though you're less knowledgeable about certain details, it prompts the opponent to underestimate your position, and that results in them revealing more information than they intended, or offering concessions to gain what they perceive as an advantage. The key lies in creating information imbalance that works in your favor, where the opponent believe they are in control. For me, is this a dodgy tactic? I don't think so. I think really what this stems back to is that everybody loves being asked for their opinion, being asked for their thoughts on things. Everybody loves to feel like you're coming to them for advice. We're all really happy to feel as if we are oh, you're coming to me for advice and my opinion. Because in our day-to-day lives, that doesn't really happen a lot, I don't think. For a lot of people, I spent 6 years of my life doing talking heads, B2B videos and interviewing people at work most of the time. And I'm taking an interest in their everyday life, and people light up when they actually talk about things, even if they're an accountant or they do a job that society deems as boring. They light up when they actually get to talk about what they do and how it's interesting. And if you take a genuine interest in somebody, it's the most attractive thing that you can do, and people will open up and they will tell you things that they're not necessarily supposed to tell you things. I've interviewed like prime ministers and senior ministers, and they've told me like actual government secrets that I'm not supposed to know, and they know I'm not supposed to know. But just because I'm like, oh, that sounds so interesting, and I'm so enthusiastic, and suddenly you find yourself talking more to somebody who is taking what seems to be a genuine interest. So I think overall, feigning interest or pretending that you know less is good, and it can teach you new things in the same way that training somebody can really do that. I always think training somebody is the best way of enhancing your own knowledge, because it forces you to think through your own process, your own thought process, and what you've learned, and reflect on that and then teach it to somebody else. In the same way, pretending that you don't know something can extract that information from somebody else, and then you can influence that. Those are my thoughts and feelings for this week about, is it smart to act stupid? I think in some situations it can be. Thanks very much for watching, and tune in next week for some more Gin with Gwynne.